You got to be a monster to be a member of any gang, but particularly the Crips, you better be a monster.
In the heart of Los Angeles, where the city beats with nonstop chaos, lives a story soaked in survival, defiance, and raw power. Welcome to the world of the Rolling 90s, a crew whose 41 years of dominance left scars on every block of L.A. Picture a city painted in blood, ambition, and betrayal, where every alley whispers secrets of victory and heartbreak. For more than 4 decades, the Rolling 90s weren't just a name. They were a force that had both respect and fear chasing them everywhere. But beyond the flashing lights of cop cars and the bold headlines, there's another side, a twisted mix of loyalty, family ties, and the desperate hunger to belong in a city that often acts like it doesn't care. These aren't just tales of crime. They're stories of people fighting to exist in a system built against them.
I walked in the house, and I remember seeing it on the news. I must have been about 15 at that time. I remember my mom was on the phone, and she was like, I'm so tired of these kids shooting one another and killing one another. And I remember thinking to myself, like, man, she has no idea that I was just in this situation.
Every sunset in L.A. wasn't just about the city lights, it was about who made it out alive. The Rolling 90s kept their ruthless grip tight, but underneath all that toughness, there was still a hunger for change, for something better. People could feel it, like the streets were waiting for a reset, a moment when the neighborhoods would finally belong to the people again. And when you step into their saga, it's impossible not to feel the storm of emotions. You can't ignore the pain for the lost lives, the twisted respect for those who kept pushing through, and even that shocking sense of understanding for those walking the razor's edge between right and wrong. This is more than history. It's the dark heartbeat of L.A., and tonight we're taking you inside the shadows of the Rolling 90s, uncovering their secrets, their scars, and the legacy that refuses to die. The Rolling 90s neighborhood Crips first surfaced in the 1970s, born out of the larger Crips movement that had already spread across Los Angeles. Their roots run deep in South Central, in areas like West Adams and Jefferson Park, streets that became the stage for their rise. What started as just a small crew under the Crip umbrella turned into a powerful name that the city couldn't ignore. Over time, the Rolling 90s grew into one of the most feared and respected forces in the gang world. But with that power came a reputation built on blood, hustling, and ruthless ambition. Banned substance, robberies, and violent run-ins became the currency of their empire, turning their blocks into battlefield that outsiders dared not step into. The Crips themselves had been born in the late 60s as a defense against rival gangs, young black men trying to hold their own against the dangers of the streets. But as years passed, the Rolling 90s carved out their own turf, and their loyalty to their set became legendary. They were willing to ride or die for their neighborhood, and violence was always on the table if it meant keeping outsiders in check.
There's another situation too where we were getting ready to go out on what they call Sunday Fun Day, when all the lowriders, all the motorcycle clubs, all the car clubs, all the gang members, that's like the one day to where all the gang members, enemies, everybody can congregate in one area on Crenshaw Boulevard. I remember we seen a car pull up to the corner. And usually when you see cars pull up in the corner with no lights or anything like that, you know that's a sign of something that's gonna happen. And all you see was guns come out the window and everybody just got to shooting at everybody. And we all just scattered like ants, just everybody screaming, hollering, running, scattering, because no one had guns actually on their person at the time.
By the time the crack epidemic ripped through South Central in the 80s and 90s, the Rolling 90s saw an opportunity they couldn't ignore. They jumped headfirst into the illicit substance game, flooding their territory with crack and stacking serious money and influence. The hustle turned them from just another crew into an organized, structured machine, with leaders at the top calling shots and soldiers on the ground ready to move on command. And it didn't stop there. They built alliances with other gangs and tapped into bigger criminal networks, tightening their grip on the city. The Rolling 90s weren't just surviving anymore. They were running their streets with an iron fist, and everybody knew it. With the Rolling 90s rise came a storm of heat from law enforcement. Cops zeroed in on South Central, launching raids, making arrests, and trying to break the gang apart. But every time the police thought they had them cornered, the 90s bounced back, adapting, regrouping, and keeping their grip on the streets. The crackdowns only made them more calculated, more ruthless, and even harder to shut down. Even today, The rolling 90s keep running into rival sets and dealing with their own inside drama. But through it all, they've stayed a dominant force, still moving in the shadows, still pulling strings across their territory. At the center of it all is Jamal Shakir, better known on the streets as Donut. His name rings heavy in L.A., and as the shot caller, he decides who moves, who eats, and who gets left behind. His influence is massive, making him one of the most powerful figures tied to the gang. Then there's Space Ghost, a name that carries weight in the rolling 90s. He's no background player, he's been deep in the game and holds authority over soldiers on the ground. When Space Ghost speaks, members listen, and that shows just how much power he commands.
When I was coming up, the guns that were used in gang bangings were the 9mm, the 45s, Mossberg 12-gauge shotgun pump, AK-47s, Tech 9s. The first gun that I ever got placed in my hand, given to me as a gift from one of my homeboys, was a 25, a chrome 25, little small 25 with the pearl handle. Had like 7 shots, 6 shots in it or something like that. And as you got older and you learn more about guns and elevate yourself, of course you get bigger guns.
Cameron Terrell is another figure who dragged the gang into headlines nationwide. A highly publicized homicide case linked him to the 90s and threw the spotlight straight onto their world. His name stirred major controversy, painting the crew as even more dangerous and unpredictable. And don't forget Rocket, an affiliate who turned his gang ties into rap clout. His music career made him known outside the streets, but his connection to the 90s kept him tied to their legacy of crime and notoriety. The rolling 90s weren't just feared in the alleys, they were now a name echoing in the media, music, and every corner of South L.A. Rocket might spit bars, but his name rings loud in the streets for more than just music. His connection to the rolling 90s keeps him tied to the raw reality of gang culture, giving him that edge in hip-hop that fans and critics can't ignore. But behind the beats and the spotlight, the rolling 90s are still knee-deep in a world of extortion, hustling, and violent crime. At the top sits Donut, the man whose word moves the whole machine. His leadership keeps the crew running like a business, strategic, calculated, and always ready for whatever rival gangs or law enforcement throw their way. Then you got Space Ghost, the enforcer whose grip on the younger members keeps discipline tight. He doesn't just keep order, his moves in the streets bring money and respect, fueling the gang's rise in power. And who could forget Cameron Terrell, the name that dragged the rolling 90s onto every front page? His high-profile homicide case became proof of just how ruthless and unpredictable this gang could be, cementing their reputation as one of LA's most dangerous. Meanwhile, Rocket keeps blending two worlds, music and the streets. His lyrics drip with the pain, loyalty, and chaos of gang life, giving him credibility that most rappers could only dream of.
For example, the A-Trade Gangster Crips, they have a peace treaty going on with the Inglewood Family Bloods. And that's because their borderline is connected right next to one another. So since our neighborhoods are so close to one another, you got to come through my neighborhood to get home. I got to come to your neighborhood to get home. Let's make this a blood-free zone. No violence. Not saying that we're homeboys or we're just a close hood, but let's keep the peace between this dynamic, between this area.
His rolling 90s affiliation isn't just background, it's a stamp that adds weight to his persona in hip-hop and urban culture. Together, these figures shape the rolling 90s into more than just a gang. They're an empire of influence. From Donut's strategic leadership to Space Ghost's authority, Terrell's media frenzy, and Rocket's street-certified rap clout, each one plays a role in keeping the rolling 90s name alive, feared, and respected across LA. The rolling 90s have found themselves at the center of some explosive, high-profile cases, putting their name on the radar of law enforcement and the media alike. One of the most infamous stories involves Cameron Terrell, a case that shocked Los Angeles because it exposed the wild collision between privilege and gang life. Terrell didn't come from the streets. He came from money, from an affluent family with every advantage at his feet. And yet, his name ended up tied to the rolling 90s in a way that nobody saw coming. Authorities accused him of serving as the getaway driver in a fatal South LA shooting that claimed the life of a 21-year-old man. The incident, labeled gang-related by investigators, turned Terrell into the face of a conversation about race, privilege, and the reach of gang influence. What made it all so scandalous was the glaring contrast. Here was a kid with wealth and opportunity, standing side by side with one of the city's most feared gangs. It shook up the narrative and forced people to confront an uncomfortable truth.
When Raymond Washington got killed, that's what caused the division. That's when Crippin became divided between the East and the West, and different things start happening in different subsets, and it just became like a disease. One Crip set betrayed this Crip set, and it just caused a never-ending feud.
Gang culture isn't boxed in by poverty alone. It can cross lines of class, race, and background. Terrell's case became more than a trial. It was a mirror held up to society, sparking heated debates across L.A. and beyond. But Terrell wasn't the only headline tied to the 90s. Jamal Shakir, better known as Donut, was branded the kingpin of a violent interstate illicit substance operation. His case made federal news when the U.S. The Attorney's Office announced his conviction in 2008 after an 8-month trial that exposed everything from narcotic trafficking and money laundering to obstruction of justice. The feds weren't just after him. They wanted him sentenced to end. Instead, Shakir was hit with multiple life sentences, cementing his reputation as one of the most powerful and feared leaders connected to the rolling 90s.
They come from everywhere. Now, where they get them from could be from the police force, it could be from the military. You can never be caught what we call lacking or slipping. From the early 80s all the way up through the mid-90s, those were the years of heightened gang activities. So drive-by shootings were nothing. You could literally turn your news on every day during those years and see a drive-by shooting. Every day.
These cases ripped open the curtain on just how far the gang's reach stretched, from privileged suburbs to federal courtrooms, and proved the rolling 90s weren't just another L.A. set. They were a name with weight across the entire nation. In the end, the jury couldn't all agree on the end penalty, but that didn't save Jamal Shakir from a fate just as severe. The judge hit him with 16 life sentences, stacked with another 9 consecutive life sentences for homicide and his long list of crimes. On top of that, a $9 million forfeiture was slapped on him, $3 million for each of 3 counts, turning the courtroom into a stage where justice came down hard. The U.S. attorney didn't hold back either, declaring, "We pursued justice for each of the homicide victims and every victim of the violent crimes this defendant committed as part of his interstate empire." Shakir's narcotic empire wasn't just local, it was poison spreading across entire states, dragging in gang members, wrecking families, and tearing communities apart. His attempts to block the system and dodge justice collapsed, and the verdict left no doubt: he will never breathe free air again. The evidence painted him as the mastermind of a continuing criminal enterprise, one that moved over 150 kilos of cocaine, along with massive amounts of crack and marijuana. And behind it all was his connection to the rolling 90s, the Los Angeles set that gave him the muscle and manpower to run a fatal empire.
It comes down to, hey, you've been hanging around us a lot, you've been chilling a lot, you from the hood, let's make it official. And making it official means getting jumped in or doing something to be a member of the gang. Can be anything from you fighting one person, sometimes 4 or 5 persons. It's to see how you handle yourself. It's to see what type of skills you have. If you get into one of these type situations, can you stand your ground and hold your own, whether you get beat up or not? You have to know how to fight back.
But Shakir didn't just move controlled substance. He moved people. He recruited soldiers straight out of the rolling 90s and beyond, building an army that stretched from L.A. to Nashville, Memphis, Oklahoma City, and other cities across the map. The jury tied him and his crew to 9 assassinations, whether by his own hands, his orders, or his co-conspirators carrying them out. Shakir wasn't just another gang leader, he was the face of a violent empire, one that the feds vowed to crush, and the multiple life sentences made sure his name would be remembered in infamy, not freedom. Between 1994 and 1997, the jury tied Jamal Shakir to some of the most horrifying crimes imaginable. Evidence showed that at least 3 people were executed just to stop them from cooperating with law enforcement. On top of that, Shakir orchestrated the transport of an accomplice from Nashville to Oklahoma City to commit a violent crime that spiraled into a nightmare, a double assassination and the shooting of a 3-year-old child. The most chilling detail? That child survived, barely. Left inside a house with the decomposing bodies of her pregnant mother and the mother's boyfriend, she clung to life by drinking toilet water for nearly 2 weeks before being found. The sheer brutality of it shook even hardened courtroom observers, exposing just how cold-blooded and far-reaching Shakir's enterprise had become. The list of lives lost reads like a tragic roll call. Richard Chambers ended in Cheatham County, Tennessee, on August 29, 1994. Solomon Harris, gunned down in Los Angeles on September 29, 1995. Sharon Duran ended in L.A. on December 13, 1995. Anthony Rogers, executed in Oklahoma City on July 20, 1996.
We became one of the biggest enemies to the Hoovers because our sets are so close to one another. To get to the Hoover hood, you got to come through our hood. You know what I'm saying? And so for us to get to other parts of the city, we got to go through the Hoover hood.
Shannon Walker ended in Los Angeles on October 3, 1996. Then came the Oklahoma City double assassination. Kennard Murray and Regina Suka assassinated on January 23, 1997, where the 3-year-old survivor was discovered. Months later, Barney Moten ended in Los Angeles on February 21, 1997. Finally, Woody Pilcher was born in Oklahoma City on August 2, 1997, and it didn't stop at homicide. The jury also convicted Shakir of dragging juveniles into his narcotic empire, arming himself and his crew with guns for narcotic deals and violent crimes, and laundering dirty money through his criminal network. His reign of terror stretched across states, leaving behind shattered families, ruined communities, and scars that still haven't healed. Obstruction of justice, abductions, threats, the list of crimes tied to the rolling 90s kept stacking up. The jury uncovered chilling details of victims being snatched, beaten, and intimidated, all to protect Shakir's interstate empire. This wasn't just a street hustle, it was the result of a multi-year organized crime and illicit substance enforcement task force investigation that pulled in more than 40 defendants on charges ranging from money laundering to firearms trafficking and violent crimes. The rolling 90s illicit substance game became their lifeline and their curse. Authorities connected them to the distribution of everything from marijuana to harder substances, proving that their empire wasn't just about turf, it was about running the streets through addiction and profit. Every deal fueled not only their power, but also the destruction of the very communities they claimed to represent. Families broken, neighborhoods destabilized, and young lives caught in the cycle, the damage was everywhere. And street powder were only part of the story. Violence ran through the gang like blood in their veins. Shootings, beatdowns, and assaults turned South L.A. blocks into danger zones where fear ruled the night. Each act of violence didn't just scar the victims. It sparked new waves of retaliation, keeping the streets locked in an endless loop of vengeance and bloodshed. One of their fiercest battles came against the 83 gangster Crips, a rivalry that has left the city bleeding for years. The rolling 90s and the 80s don't just dislike each other. They despise one another, and their clashes have exploded into gunfights and fatal encounters that spill into the neighborhoods. These aren't petty beefs. They're all-out battles, where grudges stretch across generations, and every confrontation risks another body on the pavement. The legacy of these feuds isn't just written in police reports, it's etched in the fear that lingers on every block touched by their violence. The combat between the rolling 90s and the 83 gangster Crips has turned Los Angeles into a battlefield where nobody is safe. People from both sides have been wounded or assassinated in clashes that can erupt anywhere, from street corners to public spots in broad daylight. These fights aren't random. They're displays of dominance, each side trying to prove who really owns the block.
Because your mom is out working, trying to make a living for you, provide for you. While she's at work, you're out there running the streets, doing shit that you know you're not supposed to be doing. And that's pretty much how I started it.
This feud has been burning for decades, creating a cycle of violence that refuses to die. Every time one side strikes, the other feels the need to hit back harder, and the retaliation just keeps spinning out of control. For the neighborhoods caught in the middle, it's pure terror. Families living in fear, kids dodging danger on their way to school, and everyday people worried about being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Law enforcement struggles to keep up, but shutting this conflict down is like trying to stop a wildfire with bare hands. The gangs are heavily armed, deeply entrenched in the illicit substance trade, and unafraid to clash in broad daylight. Cops may sweep the blocks, but the violence always bubbles back to the surface, leaving officers frustrated and communities scarred. What makes it even worse is how rooted these gangs are in their neighborhoods. The rolling 90s and the 80s threes aren't just crews. They're family networks, street identities, and legacies that run deep. That's why peace feels nearly impossible. Members are born into this life, carrying grudges passed down like twisted traditions. The rivalry between the rolling 90s and the 83 gangster Crips isn't just another street beef, It's a battle that defines whole communities, a violent struggle that keeps LA on edge, and a reminder that some battles don't end with a truce, they end with bodies. The long conflict between the rolling 90s and the '83 gangster Crips left scars across Los Angeles. Streets soaked in fear, families torn apart, and a community that never truly felt safe. Stopping this rivalry has never been simple, but the need for peace has never been more urgent. As we close the chapter on the rolling 90s and their 41-year reign, what's left behind is a legacy drenched in both power and pain. Their story isn't just about gang combats or hustling. It's about the hunger for purpose, belonging, and survival in a city that often turns its back on its own. The 90s showed the world resilience, unity, and how loyalty can build an empire, even if it's an empire born in chaos. Through triumphs and devastating losses, their saga proves one thing. Even in the darkest corners of LA, there's still a glimmer of change waiting to break through. The real essence of their story isn't in the flashing lights of cop cars or the sound of gunfire echoing down Crenshaw. It's in the unbreakable brotherhood that was forged in the fire. That bond, twisted as it may seem, was their strength and their curse all at once. The rolling 90s are proof that the human spirit can rise, even in the most brutal of circumstances. Their journey is a raw reminder that redemption is never out of reach, and that the streets, as unforgiving as they are, still carry lessons about loyalty, struggle, and survival. So now it's on you. What do you think about the legacy of the rolling 90s? Was it a story of destruction or a lesson in resilience? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your people. And I'll catch you in the next one.